Alexander the Great rode Bucephalus. Napoleon had Marengo. The Duke of Wellington, Copenhagen. And there is no more famous pair in American history than Robert E. Lee and Traveler. The Civil War was the last great conflict in American history where men and their horses were interminably linked. James Ewell Brown Stuart epitomized the image of the dashing Southern cavalryman, and his horses, mostly of thoroughbred stock, reflected that cavalier spirit.
J.E.B. Stuart was an excellent horseman, one of the best as a cadet at West Point, and he continued to hone his skill serving the U.S. Cavalry out west. He had a number of horses during the war, but one of his favorites was a thoroughbred mare called Virginia, who once carried him over a 10-foot wide ditch during one of his famous rides around McClellan's army. Like many Confederate officers, Stuart continued to use his old U.S. saddle during his service with the Confederate Army. The saddle is made from a wooden tree covered in rawhide with leather skirts.
Stuart was riding a gray stallion called General when he was mortally wounded at Yellow Tavern in May of 1864.
Stonewall Jackson came across a rangy but serviceable looking horse amongst some captured horses at Harper's Ferry. He originally intended to give it to his wife, but after riding him decided to keep him for himself and called him Little Sorrel because of his relatively small size and the reddish-brown color of his coat.
The horse's chunky lines were made awkward by an unusually large neck and an undistinguished head. His eyes were his chief beauty, being most intelligent and expressive, and soft as a gazelle's. Mary Anna Jackson, wife of Stonewall Jackson.
Jackson was an able enough rider, but I doubt if anybody ever accused him of being graceful in the saddle.
Little Sorrel proved to be a tireless mount during the long marches of Jackson's foot cavalry, sometimes carrying the general up to 40 miles a day. Little Sorrel saw action at Manassas, in the Shenandoah Valley, at Fredericksburg, and of course at Chancellorsville, where Jackson was mortally wounded, accidentally shot by his own men, though Little Sorrel escaped unharmed. Little Sorrel spent the remainder of his life among the veterans who had served beside him during the war, and as an attraction to curiosity seekers who wished to get a glimpse of Stonewall's famous war horse. Little Sorrel lived to a ripe old age and died in 1886, outliving his famous rider by 23 years. Traveler was of American saddlebred and thoroughbred stock. Foaled on a farm in Greenbrier County, West Virginia, the gray colt was sired by the famous Kentucky racehorse Gray Eagle.
Lee had admired the 4-year-old 16-hand gelding called Greenbrier by the Confederate officer who owned him, Captain Brown. Even before acquiring the horse, Lee used to refer to him as my colt. Undoubtedly conscious of rank, Captain Brown offered the horse as a gift to Robert E. Lee, but Lee insisted on paying $200 for him. He named his colt Traveler.
He needed neither whip nor spur, and would walk his 5 or 6 miles an hour over the rough mountain roads of western Virginia, with his rider sitting firmly in the saddle and holding him in check with a tight rein. Such vim and vigor did he manifest to go right ahead so soon as he was mounted. Thomas L. Brown.
Though Lee had and occasionally rode other horses, Traveler was by far his favorite, and Traveler stayed with him till the very end at Appomattox Courthouse.
The best description of Traveler was Lee's own, which he wrote in response to Mrs. Lee's cousin, who wished to paint a portrait of Traveler. If I was an artist like you, I would draw a true picture of Traveler, representing his fine proportions, muscular figure, deep chest, short back, strong haunches, flat legs, small head, broad forehead, delicate ears, quick eye, small feet, and black mane and tail. Such a picture would inspire a poet, whose genius could then depict his worth.
After the war, Lee became president of Washington College, which is now Washington Lee University in Lexington, Virginia, where Traveler was allowed to graze on the college lawn, and souvenir seekers would pluck hairs from his mane and tail, which in the end made Traveler rather shy of strangers.
Robert E. Lee died in 1870. Traveler died the next year from tetanus after stepping on a rusty nail. His final resting place is at the university beside the chapel where Lee is interred.